everybody. So, I have an interesting little story about when I was 8 years old. I was watching TV, as most of us do, your middle America boring programming. Unfortunately influenced my career. And I'm sitting there with my mom, and all of a sudden, there's this fashion show. These beautiful, gorgeous women in fur coats, and they're going slow motion down this runway. And then there's this smash cut, and there's the baby seal slaughter. And there's footage of men hacking away. There's blood on the ice. And then it flashes back to the fashion show. And it interconnects this glamour and vanity with the horror that at 8 years old I had never imagined seeing something like that. And it sparked something in me that today is responsible for me being an activist, a vegan. And I didn't know the person that was behind that was Captain Paul Watson. He's been defending the marine habitat, the oceans, and various creatures that walk this earth with us for over 30 years. In 1972, he was one of the founding fathers of Greenpeace. And then he started the Sea Shepherd Conservation Society, which I'm proud to be a part of. This man exemplifies bravery and courage, the kind of examples that we'd all like to live up to. And he bears the burden of witnessing man's most horrific and inhumane treatment of our fellow creatures. But as a result, he also exemplifies the most noble and righteous and beautiful qualities that a man can have, and that is to make a difference in this world at the expense and cost of everything you know. Introducing Captain Paul Watson.
Thank you. I was recently in Ottawa with Persia and with Bridget Bardot to deliver a message to the Government of Canada that we're still opposing the slaughter of seals. This month is they'll be completing the seal slaughter in Canada, and it's the largest slaughter of marine mammals anywhere in the world. Over 350,000 seal pups have been killed. And we're putting as much pressure on the Government of Canada as we possibly can. And so I encourage everybody to boycott Canada until they stop killing baby seals. I know it's a little chilly here today, but we recently just came back from a place that's a little cooler than this, and that's Antarctica. And my crew and I just returned from chasing the Japanese whaling fleet along the coast of Antarctica. We chased them for 4,000 miles for 50 days. And the fleet just returned to Japan, and they were 85 whales short of their quota. So we were able to protect 85 whales. And unfortunately, we could have done better, but we had an old ship, and it was sort of, we would catch up with them, they would run, we would catch up with them again, they would run again, and we were able to stop them from whaling for a total of 15 days during that time. But Japan is intending on going back to Antarctica at the end of this year with a target of 900 minke whales and 50 endangered humpbacks and another 50 endangered fins. So they're flagrantly targeting endangered species, and the governments of the world are doing nothing about it. In fact, the governments of the world are watching the world go to hell because they're more involved with trade agreements with each other and doing favors for the corporations of each other's countries than they are in protecting the world that we live in. The United States, for instance, has the power to shut down whaling today, because the law in the United States under the Commerce Department regulations states that any nation that doesn't abide by the International Whaling Commission regulations protecting whales will not allow to be trading with fish products in the United States. That would shut down Japan, it would shut down Norway. But ever since that law came into effect in 1986, the United States government has responded by sending a strongly worded letter of protest every year to Japan and Norway, which they promptly throw in the garbage and ignore. The problem is that we have all of the rules, the regulations, and the treaties we need to protect the world's oceans and marine wildlife in them, but we don't have any enforcement. The governments of the world are not doing anything to uphold the law. As Captain Jacques Cousteau said just before he died, the oceans are dying in our time, and if the navies of the world had any sense of responsibility, they'd be protecting the oceans instead of playing silly little war games with each other. But it's difficult. It's difficult to try and protect marine wildlife because we're land-dwelling animals, and for the most of us, it's out of sight and out of mind. But the oceans are dying, and I don't say that to, because it's all doom and gloom. It's the truth. I've been on the oceans now for the last 35 years, and I've seen a steady diminishment in seabirds and marine mammals and fish. All the world's major fisheries are in a state of collapse. The reason being, too many people, not enough fish. And just look at it this way. We condemn people in West Africa for going out and killing giraffe and mountain gorillas and lions and selling it as bushmeat. We don't support that. We think that's pretty despicable. But there really is no difference between going out on ships and taking large predators like sharks and swordfish and tuna and bringing them back and serving them in restaurants. It's aquatic bushmeat is what it is. The fishing industry has destroyed the oceans through their longliners and their draggers and their drift nets, and we sit there and watch it happen because everybody wants to have, their tuna fish sandwich. What we have so done to this planet is this, that we have turned the domestic house cat into the world's largest aquatic predator. More fish are consumed every year by house cats than all the world's seals put together. We have turned cows and pigs and sheep into aquatic predators because more than 50% of the fish that comes out of the oceans is fed to cows, pigs, and sheep and chickens. That's not hardly natural, but this is the world that we have created. We are destroying the world's oceans in order to continue to support the meat industry. One of the reasons I've been so concerned about and so involved and so impassioned about protecting whales goes back many years to 1975. And we had come up with a tactic back then to interfere with whaling, and we were reading a lot of Gandhi at the time, and we felt that all we had to do was put our lives on the line, protect the whales with our bodies. It was a tactic that we developed, and it was to get between the harpoons and the whales. And so off the coast of Northern California in 1975, I had the opportunity, along with Bob Hunter, to put ourselves in a position to do that. And I suddenly found myself in a little rubber boat, behind me a 150-foot steel Soviet harpoon vessel bearing down on us, and in front of us 8 magnificent sperm whales that were fleeing for their life. And every time that the harpooner tried to take a shot, I would maneuver the little rubber boat and block the path of the harpoon. And that worked for about 20 minutes until the captain of the whaling vessel came down the catwalk, walked up to the harpooner, screamed into his ear, and then he turned to us and smiled and brought his finger across his throat like that. And that's when I realized Gandhi wasn't going to pull us through that day. And a few minutes later, there was this horrific explosion, and this 150-pound harpoon flew over our head and slammed into the backside of one of the sperm whales that was in front of us that we were trying to protect. And the whale screamed. And it never occurred to me that a whale could scream, and it was a very human-like scream. And suddenly, the largest whale in that pod of 8 sperm whales rose up, and I saw him hit the water with his tail, and he disappeared. And we've been told by all of the experts that that whale would attack us, because we've seen all of the old Yankee woodcuts of whale boats being attacked by angry sperm whales. So I can tell you it was with a great deal of anxiety that we sat in a little rubber boat waiting for 50 tons of very angry animal to come up underneath of us. But suddenly, the ocean erupted behind me, and I turned in time to see this whale throw himself from the water straight at the harpooner on the Soviet vessel. He didn't attack us, he attacked the person who shot one of the females in the pod. But they were ready for him, and the Soviet harpooner just nonchalantly pulled the trigger and sent another harpoon at point-blank range into the whale's head. And it exploded, and the whale screamed and fell back in the water, thrashing about. And he was dying, blood everywhere. And suddenly he rolled over, and I caught his eye. And he looked at me, and now I saw the whale disappear. He dove again beneath the waves, and I saw a trail of bloody bubbles coming straight at our little boat. And this whale came up and out of the water at an angle over above us, so that the next move was to crash forward and crush our small boat. But as the whale rose up out of the water and I looked into an eye, the eye the size of my fist, right there, what I saw was understanding. That the whale understood what we were trying to do, because with a great effort, the whale suddenly pulled back, looked at me, and slid back into the sea, and I saw his eye disappear beneath the waves, and he died. The whale could have taken our life and spared us, chose not to do so. And so that's one of the reasons I'm indebted to that whale, and that's one of the reasons I spent the rest of my life protecting whales. But I also saw something else in that eye, and it was pity. Not for himself, but for us. That we could take life so thoughtlessly without even thinking about why we were doing it. And as I sat there in that little boat on the ocean, I began to think, why are we killing these whales? The Russians were killing the whales for spermaceti oil primarily, a high heat-resistant oil used for machinery. And one of the pieces of machinery that they were using spermaceti oil for was the construction of intercontinental ballistic missiles. And I said to myself, here we are destroying this beautiful, intelligent, socially complex creature for the purpose of manufacturing a weapon meant for the mass extermination of people. And that's when it occurred to me that we're insane. The entire species is insane. And ever since, that's why I worked for whales, seals, seabirds, and fish, because we're trying to protect the earth so that they can have a future. Because all of our victories are always temporary. We can stop a seal hunt here, but it'll come back again in 10 years. We can stop them from destroying a habitat, but they'll come back again. Because more and more people means more and more demand for resources. And so we have to buy time and buy space where we can, when we can. Because like I said, all our victories are temporary, but unfortunately our defeats are permanent. The defeats are extinction. The whales of the world will disappear. They will be obliterated. They will be wiped off the face of this planet if Japan and Norway have their way. If they seize control of the International Whaling Commission, if they continue to flaunt the laws and nobody has any motivation to enforce the laws, they will destroy the whales. They will make as much money as they possibly can. And they say, oh, well, why would we do that if we depend on them? That's not the way fisheries work anymore. Fishing industries today are not out there to make livelihoods for fishermen. They're out there to realize the maximum amount of profit in the shortest period of time. And if that means extermination of the species they're targeting, they don't have any problem with that, because they will simply take the profit from that and turn it into another industry, whether it be exploring for oil or building other computers, whatever. There are no fishermen anymore. There are corporations that are destroying the oceans. That is what it has evolved into. The fisherman doesn't exist. All that exists are wage slaves for corporations who are dead set upon destroying life in our oceans. You know, we spend billions of dollars searching through the solar system for intelligent life to communicate with, when we have intelligent life right here on the planet with us that we don't even attempt to talk to or communicate with. What is intelligence? Intelligence is the ability to live in harmony with your natural world. By that criteria, we're the stupidest of species. I was debating a whaler in Norway one time, and he said, but Watson, you say that whales are intelligent. That is a very stupid thing to say. How could you say something so nonsense like that? And I said, well, George, George Blitchfield, the head of the Whaling Association, I said, George, I measure intelligence by the ability to live in harmony with the natural world. And he said, well, that's ridiculous. By that criteria, cockroaches are more intelligent than we are. I said, George, you're beginning to understand what I'm trying to tell you. The fact is that we are the most intelligent species on the planet, because we say we're the most intelligent species on the planet. We haven't got any evidence to back that up with. Oops. We haven't got any evidence to back that up with at all. Oops. Looks like I got a sailing boat behind me. But just take a look at the physiology of it. The human brain, 1,300 cubic centimeters. The orca brain, 6,000 cubic centimeters, and the sperm whale brain, the largest brain to have ever evolved on this planet, 9,000 cubic centimeters. And they said, well, they're big animals. Well, so were dinosaurs with brains the size of walnuts. The thing is that elephants and whales and dolphins are big-brained animals, but they don't have technology. And we measure intelligence by technology. If a blob of protoplasm stepped out of a spaceship with a ray gun, oh, well, it must be intelligent. That's how we measure intelligence. But real intelligence is measured by the ability of a species to survive within the ecosystem within which they live. And they have to abide by the three basic laws of ecology. The law of diversity, that the strength of an ecosystem depends upon diversity within it. The law of interdependence, that all of those species are interdependent with each other. And the law of finite resources, that there's a limit to growth, there's a limit to carrying capacity. And we right now are living in an age which Richard Leakey described as the sixth major extinction in world history. We will lose more species of plants and animals between 1980 and 2045 than we have lost in the last 65 million years. That rate of extinction is unprecedented, and we as one species are responsible for that. But we don't give it very much thought because we live in a fantasy world most of the time. We're too busy entertaining ourselves and believing in pie-in-the-sky afterlives to realize that we're living right now in heaven, and that is the planet Earth, and all of these creatures around us are our brothers and sisters that we ignore at our own peril because of the law of interdependence. If we remove too many of them, we die. We cannot survive without that interdependence. You know, and a lot of people say, oh, you know, you conservationists, you're a bunch of doom and gloom Cassandras, you know, always preaching and predicting doom and gloom. Well, all that tells me is that they didn't read Homer, because if they had, they would have realized that Cassandra did indeed preach doom and gloom, but she was right. Everything she predicted came to pass. And this is what environmentalists and conservationists have been doing, is making predictions not to scare people, but in order to make people think and to understand that if we're going to survive, we have to incorporate the rest of life into our understanding, our philosophy. We have to incorporate and understand that they are all part of it. We cannot no longer survive in an anthropocentric world where all values are human-oriented. The problem is that we're extremely conceited. We're one big, overly glorified, conceited, naked ape. We're all divine legends in our own mind. You know, and we fail to look around and see what we're doing to the rest of the world. But we have an obligation and a responsibility to protect all of those other creatures, plant and animal. I set up the Sea Shepherd Conservation Society back in 1977, not as a protest organization, but as an organization to intervene directly to uphold international conservation laws and regulations, a self-appointed law enforcement organization. And we're empowered to do so by virtue of the United Nations World Charter for Nature that states that any non-government organization can uphold international conservation law. And we get called a lot of names for that. We get called eco-terrorists. We get called pirates. I mean, I don't care what they call us. The fact is never been convicted of a crime. We've sunk 10 whaling ships. We've rammed whaling vessels on the high seas. We've destroyed millions and millions and millions of dollars worth of long lines and drift nets and drag nets. And why have I not been convicted of a crime? Because all of our targets were criminals. They were all operating in violation of international law. And when they called us pirates, I said, I don't have any problem with that, so we adopted our own Jolly Roger. And because if you go back to the 17th century and recall, it wasn't the British or Spanish navies that shut down piracy in the Caribbean. They're all too busy taking bribes. Sort of similar to what's going on in the world today with governments. Piracy was shut down in the Caribbean by Henry Morgan, a pirate. If you want to stop real pirates, you need other pirates to do it. So we're pirates of compassion who are hunting down and destroying pirates of profit. And other governments are beginning to realize that. Sea Shepherd now has an alliance with actual governments. We're working in cooperation with the government of Ecuador. We have a full-time patrol boat in the Galapagos Islands. And over the last 60 years, we've We've intercepted and arrested over 65 poaching vessels, and most of them have been seized by Ecuador. So we do cooperate with governments that realize that we have to take action and we can no longer talk about these issues. Right now we're in negotiations with Mozambique and with Kenya in order to uphold their laws against poachers in their waters. Because all over the world right now, outside of the 200-mile limit especially, poaching is running rampant. Why? Because we're running out of fish. So therefore they're going into national park marine reserves and taking what they can. And when we intervene with them, we're called pirates and we're called terrorists. Well, terrorism has become a word to be used against anybody you disagree with now. The word means absolutely nothing, because if you don't like somebody, you simply call them a terrorist and hope that George Bush sends out the FBI to arrest them. But the fact is that we can't allow activism to be stifled by all of this paranoia which is going around. And that's why the Sea Shepherd Society is a volunteer organization that encourages people to come on board and learn that you, each and every one of you, can make a difference. And as long as you're not afraid to stand up and say, hey, I don't like this and I'm going to do something about it. Because we all have the power to change the world. Right now, we intend to return to Antarctica at the end of this year. We're trying to raise the funds to get a faster, longer range vessel. They want to target 900 minke whales, 50 endangered humpbacks, and 50 fin whales. We can stop them. All we need to do is get the ship to do it. And so therefore we have a budget of $3 million for that, which isn't a lot considering that, magazines are prepared to pay $5 million for a picture of Tom Cruise's baby. All we have to do is raise $3 million, and that translates to $3,000 per whale that we want to save. So that's what our target is right now, and we're looking for as much support as we possibly can. If we can get our ship down there, locate the Japanese fleet with a ship fast enough to catch them, we can shut them down by enforcing international law against them. And that's what we intend to do. And also, if anybody's interested in volunteering as a crew member, we encourage people to volunteer and get involved physically on the ship. So we've had over 3,000 volunteers since we began, people who have gone to sea, for some of them for the first time in their life, and it certainly has been a life-changing experience, and I would encourage anybody who's interested in getting involved to contact us and to do so. And in closing, I just want to say that this is a growing movement. It's the most important movement in the world. That is the movement to save life, to save the earth. And all the names they call us don't mean anything, because, it's the only movement that I know of where none of us have ever caused the death of a single human being. The conservation, environmental, animal rights movement is the most nonviolent movement to have ever existed on this planet. It's exemplary, and yet they insinuate in the media that we're violent. Meanwhile, people are being killed all the time in defense of the earth, and that's considered, you shouldn't have gotten in the way. Let's just consider that Diane Fossey was murdered for trying to protect mountain gorillas. George and Joy Adams were murdered for trying to protect elephants. Karen Silkwood was murdered for trying to expose the nuclear industry. Francisco Pereira was murdered by the government of France when they blew up the Greenpeace ship, the Rainbow Warrior, in New Zealand. And how did the media respond to that? It wasn't even considered much of a story. So why is this? Because the media in this country is in the back pocket of the corporations in this country, and the government's in the other back pocket. And we have to understand that we can't trust anything we see on TV or read in the newspapers in this country. That we have to realize that if we're going to make a difference, we have to respond from our hearts and look at things the way they really are, because we all know what's happening. You just have to open your eyes and see it falling around about you. And what does that mean? It means that we have to stand up and say, look, we're going to take matters into our hands as individuals, as caring, compassionate people, and we're going to fight back. Because the one thing that is worth fighting for on this planet Earth is life. The life not just of human beings, but of all sentient creatures that share this planet with us. We have an obligation because we steal so much from them, we have an obligation to return what we can to them. And you know, when people say to us, how can you risk, the media says to us all the time, how can you risk your life to protect a whale? You're risking, Pete, your crew's life. You know, how can you take these risks? I'm saying, well, what kind of bizarre question is that? We live in a world where you think nothing about risking your life, killing people, and dying for somebody else's oil well or a piece of real estate, and you have the audacity to ask us how we could risk our life to protect a creature like a whale or an elephant or a giraffe. Where are your priorities? The fact is that it is a much, much more noble endeavor to devote your life and risk your life to protect a living creature than it is to protect the profits of a corporation. So we have a Navy. Our Navy works on behalf of marine wildlife. We fight on behalf of whales and seals and fish and crustaceans and seabirds. And I would like to ask that you support your Navy and help protect our oceans. Thank you.